Okay, so this is my second Friday Night Live reflection for senior experience, and I wanted to talk about the readings we had to do for this week about God's will and what our plans are. So one thing that I really resonated with was the readings in the book, especially Will Weaver's Undeclared Major, because while I do have my major figured out because I'm a psychology major and I'm graduating, I've experienced the unsureness of telling my parents what I want to do with my life because currently I'm not really sure what I want to do with my life. I don't know if I should take a gap year or go to grad school right away. Like currently it's leaning more towards a gap year because I haven't applied. And so that kind of was hard at first to tell my parents that I wasn't sure what I was doing. I still don't know what I'm doing, and so I often avoid that conversation, kind of like what the writer did in his text about avoiding his dad on the farm, like telling him exactly what he wanted to do. And that really resonated with me because I had trouble with telling my dad, like, hey, I think I'm just gonna take a gap year off and do I don't know what. And so luckily my parents were also understanding, like the writer's dad, so I really could relate to that experience of being unsure of what I'm doing and unsure of if my parents will accept it, because I think your parents' acceptance of what you're going to do is probably the most important acceptance you ever experience in your life, besides obviously God's, but because you don't want to disappoint them, because you've been spending so much money on college and it's like ridiculously expensive, and so you really feel like you have to not disappoint them with what you're doing. Like, I don't feel like my parents are disappointed with what I've decided to do currently, even though there's still not really much of a decision made about what I'm doing. So currently everything's fine though, so I guess yeah, so I really resonated with the unsureness of what you're doing with your life and telling people that, because it's really hard. And I think we really need to recognize that for college students. Like, most of us really don't know what we're doing, and so I think if parents and schools and just the society in general recognize that, I think we could function a bit better, like for me especially, because there's a lot of pressure, and a lot of the pressure comes from not knowing what God wants you to do with your life. And so yeah, the other writer for the article we had to read, I really related to as well, because the idea of having God's plan being an exact blueprint is cool, but also terrifying when you don't know what it is. Like, for me, I really struggle with not knowing what God has planned for me in life. And so, yeah, like, it's just really hard. And I don't also really like the idea of the blueprint model, like having God have everything set in stone, what he wanted you to do with your life, because then where does free will come in, and where does like error come in? How do you explain that to somebody? And so I really like the author's idea of God has ideas that he wants you to do, and if some of those things don't happen, there's always a plan B. So knowing that God has something in mind is really cool, but not knowing what it is what kills me. Like, he's like, God will tell you up front what you're gonna do, and it's like, I don't think God has. And so I'm just like really struggling with listening for what God has to tell me and to be confident in that. I really struggle with that. And so the readings this week I really resonated with because they touched on areas that I currently am living in, with not knowing what I'm doing and just trying to figure out what God's plan is for me. So really appreciated that this week, and just some reassurance that others feel the same way as I do, and that God does have an idea of what he wants you to do. We just have to kind of figure out and listen for what it is. So that's my reflection for the week.